What's up? I'm the Renaissance Man, and today I'm going to be figuring out my physical D&D stats in real life. So the three stats I'm going to be figuring out are strength, dexterity, and constitution. I was originally going to include intelligence, wisdom, and charisma as well, but those are a little bit harder to quantify, so I'm not going to be including those in this video. So for strength, for each of the statistics, I'm going to be doing two different measurements to try to kind of get a better average, and I'm going to be comparing myself to the average person of my age. So for strength, I'm going to be doing a military overhead press and a standing high jump, because those are two ways that you can calculate strength. The standing high jump is common in D&D 5th edition. That's a you take 3 and then you add your strength modifier. So I'll be able to derive my strength score from that. And then the overhead military press was mentioned in the 1979 Player's Handbook. So I'm going to be using what that provided, where I believe 30 pounds is a 3 in strength. But we'll get into that more as the video goes on. And then for dexterity, I was going to do a V-sit reach and then an online reaction test on Human Benchmark, that website. So the reaction test will just be how fast I can click essentially. And then the V-sit reach, I don't think dexterity is going to be doing too well. Hopefully we can bring it up after a month as well. And then finally, the two ways I'm going to measure constitution is I'm going to see how long I can hold my breath. And then for the other one, it's going to be I'm going to do consecutive 60 feet dashes, and I'm going to try to do them in under 6 seconds and see how many I can do. Because that's another way that you can calculate constitution based it on chase mechanics in D&D 5th edition, I believe it is.
Alright, so this is going to be part one of the strength calculation. I'm just going to jump and then I don't remember the exact formula. We'll do it after I record this section. I have this tape measure right here, so I'm going to jump. It's not the most uh, elaborate system I have here. I don't know how well it's going to work, but I'm going to jump and then play back the video in slow motion. See how high I get. I'm going to do 3 jumps just as kind of like a control. So here we go with the first one. I also have to make sure I'm like in line with that because otherwise the angles will be thrown off, but it's just an approximation. So I'm not expecting much from this. Um, I don't think I can jump that high, but maybe after I do training, I'll be able to do a bit better. All right, off to the next part. All right, so this is going to be the first test for the dexterity. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the V-sit and reach, and I'm going to compare it to a normal distribution of average scores and place myself on there, and then we're going to assume that 10 is an average statistic for D&D, and we're going to calculate out from there. Um, I'm hoping to get 10 for this. I don't think I am. I am very inflexible and I have long legs to begin with, which makes it a little harder. And I have not been very good about being active recently. So I might be a little out of practice here. Here we go. I'm just going to hold it for 3 or 4 seconds, see how far I can get. Doing against the wall because I know I'm not getting above 0. I know I'm going to be in the negatives. So this is the setup we have. I know the filming angle is awkward, but it's the best I could do right now. Hopefully, in a month when I record the follow up to this, I'll have a better setup for the video. All right, here we go. Okay, that was not great. I'm hoping it's at least a decent score. Here we're going to take a look at my jump in slow motion. So I just slowed down the footage. The camera quality isn't ideal, and I stabilized it, so I rotated it slightly so that it's level. And now in this freeze frame, we can see that the height is, and it's going to be about 1 foot 5 inches. So here we have a freeze frame of the V-sit reach, and the tape measure was pulled out to 6 inches, and the tape measure itself is 2.5 inches long, so that's a total of 8.5 inches. And if you can see on the video, my fingers reach 3.5 inches, so if you take 8.5 and subtract 3.5, that gives you 5 inches, and since it is in negative x displacement from my feet, then my score on the V-sit reach is going to be negative 5 inches. So this is a picture of the treadmill I used to calculate how many dashes I could take. So in D&D 5th edition, there's chase rules, and in the chase rules, you can take the dash action, which is just an extra movement essentially, and you can take that 3 plus your constitution modifier. So the amount of times that I could dash over 3 will be my constitution modifier, which we can derive constitution score from. Now, this one isn't the best measurement of constitution, largely because I am not wearing like full armor. In D&D, you have characters wearing like full plate armor, which adds 40 pounds, carrying swords, equipment, bags. That can very easily add up to 100 pounds of gear. And in this, I was wearing athletic clothes, which made it significantly easier. So we'll get into more of the calculation in a second. But for now, we're just going to use the dash, which is how many times I can run 60 feet in 6 seconds. So 10 feet per second, and we're just going to do the math to derive the total number of dashes from the time elapsed and the miles run. Here I have my reaction time. I just did this on the Human Benchmark, which is a website that does a couple different exercises, like typing exercises, reaction times, things like that. And the reaction time test, it just has the color red on the screen, and when it turns green, you have to click as fast as you can, which there might be some input delay, but I was using a wired mouse, so the input delay should have been fairly minimal. And this one's going to be very easy to calculate how my D&D score translates, since we're going to assume that 10 is the average D&D stat. And since I was in the 74.4 percentile, then I can calculate that out, which I'll show you in a moment with the actual calculations. So these are going to be my stats with a jump height of 1 foot 5 inches, a military press of 90 pounds, a V-sit reach of -5 inches, reaction time of 193 milliseconds, a breath hold time of 1 minute and 4 seconds, and a total dashes of 11.66, which will round down to 11. You might notice that the dashes have a different distance than was shown on the treadmill image, and that's because this was recorded right after running on the treadmill, and since it took me a couple seconds to get warmed up and to be running the correct speed to be running 60 feet per 6 seconds. And it took me a couple seconds to slow down at the end. I removed that time since I was not running 60 feet per 6 seconds, so it wasn't a true D&D dash. So now we're going to do the calculations for my strength score, and we're going to start with the military press. And I was able to press 90 pounds, and in the first edition player's handbook, in order to press 10 pounds, you needed 1 strength, and this was a linear scale up from there. So if you had 10 strength, that would be 100 pounds of press. If you had 20 strength, that'd be 200 pounds. Since I was able to press 90 pounds, we divide that by 10 and we get 9, which would be my strength score if we only use this metric to calculate it. Now that we have my military press, we can take a look at my jump height. I jumped 1 foot 5 inches in this test across the 3 different jumps I did. And in D&D 5th edition, to get your high jump, you can do 3 feet plus your strength modifier, and that's how high your character can jump when running from 10 feet. In order to get their standing jump, you just divide that by 2. So you see in this equation, we have 1/2 times 3 feet plus strength modifier, and we applied 1 foot 5 inches, which is 1.42 feet, into, since that's the known value, that's what that equation equals, and that equals 0.5 times 3 plus s, which will stand for strength modifier. 1.42 divided by 0.5 gives us 2.84, which gives this the equation 2.84 equals 3 plus s. And then we subtract 3 from both sides, and we get negative 0.16 equals s, which gives us a jump strength of 10, since that is our modifier score is negative 0.16. That gives us a modifier score of negative 0.16, and I just rounded that to 0, which is a score of 10 or 11. But since it's on the lower end, it would be more like 9 or 10. Now we can take a look at my final strength score, which is just going to be a simple calculation with jump strength plus press strength divided by 2. So that's just going to be 9 plus 10 divided by 2, which is 9.5. We're going to round that down to 9. I'm just going to be rounding down to the closest whole number. So now we're going to take a look at dexterity, and we're going to start with reaction time. I had a reaction time of 193 milliseconds, which is in the 74.47 percentile. We're going to use a bell curve to figure out where our score would be. Since I was in the 74.47 percentile, and that is 24.47% above the middle 50%, so we're just going to do 24.47% times 20 minus 10, which is the maximum score in D&D, minus the average, which is 10. And most source books list 10 as like the commoner score, like the average score for like an average uh, character in Dungeons and Dragons, and that gives us 2.447, or that's our standard deviation above. And then we can just add that to 10, which is the basic median value, and that gives us a 12.45, which we round to the nearest whole number, which is 12, and now we have 12 dexterity based on this test. This is just going to be a chart of the data I found from Statistics Canada based on average visa and reach distances for my age. And Based on this, I am in the 52.8 percentile, and I'll show you the math on that in a second. Now we're going to take a more in-depth look at the VSIT reach. And I had a reach of -5 inches, but it seems like sometimes the measurement is slightly different. So sometimes it is just 15 inches towards you from your feet, in which case I would have scored 10 inches. And then I just translated that into the bell curve that I got from Statistics Canada, and I was at the 52.8 percentile, which if you take 52.8% of 20, that gives us 10.56, and since we're rounding to the nearest whole number, that gives us 11 dexterity. Finally, we can find my final dexterity, which is going to be the same equation as before, reaction time plus VSIT reach over 2, 12 plus 11 over 2. Eventually we get down to our dexterity being 11. Now we're going to move on to constitution, and we're going to start with holding breath, and I was able to hold my breath for 1 minute and 4 seconds. And in D&D 5e, there's a drowning rule that says your character can hold your breath for 1 plus your constitution modifier. So we just do 1, which is my 1 minute, which is my time to hold my breath, equals 1 plus constitution modifier, subtract 1 from both sides, you have constitution modifier equal to 0, which means my constitution score would be 10 or 11, and we're going to say it's 10 because I was on the lower end of that modifier list. I was very close to 1 exactly and not very far over it. Now we have the second part of calculating my constitution, which is using dashes, and I was able to dash 11 times. And in D&D 5th edition, there's the chase mechanic, and in the chase mechanic, the number of times you can dash is equal to 3 plus your constitution modifier. So if we take 11 equals 3 plus constitution modifier, where 11 is my number of dashes, subtract 3 from both sides, and we get my constitution modifier is equal to 8. This would give me a constitution score of 26, which is a bit an outlier, clearly based on the rest of the data. So I'm going to discount this score in this video. And when I make a follow-up to see how far my scores have increased, I'll still do this test, but I'm still going to discount it. I'm just going to do the test just so you can see the comparison. But it's very clearly an outlier, and either I misunderstood the chase mechanics, or I did some math wrong somewhere, or it just doesn't translate well into real life. Now to get my final constitution score, which will just be breath hold plus dash over 2, which will be 10 plus 26 divided by 2, which goes to 36 over 2, which is 18, and it's just 10 if we don't include the dash. I thought I'd just still include the dash in this calculation just so you could see how much it would skew the data. So these are going to be my final stats. I got a 9 in strength, an 11 in dexterity, and a 10 in constitution. And now this is pretty much average for a D&D civilian, which isn't too bad. Especially since like a world with like dragons and stuff. So like I definitely could be worse off. I'm gonna try to train these up a little bit, and then in a couple months I'll post a follow-up to this where I go through how I trained and how much my scores increased, if they increased at all. I'd love to hear what your scores are. So drop a comment if you want to try this out for yourself and leave what scores you got. And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content and want to see more. Thank you.